Welcome to Connecting the Dots, an Amici podcast presented by me, George Mingozzi-Marsh, where each episode I meet with an artist and chat about their community, collaborations, and how these connections continue to shape the artists they are today. In this episode, I'm speaking with my dear friend Adeline de Monseignat, and we recorded this in her studio in Mexico City back in February of this year during Mexico City's Art Week. As we discuss, Adeline and I have known each other for quite a long time, so it was lovely to catch up and reminisce and go back to the early stages of her career and follow her journey and her development a little bit, from when she was living and working in London to where she is now in Mexico City, and also touch on a little bit of how her practice has evolved along with that journey that she has taken. Adeline has a warmth and generosity of spirit, which I think is resonant through her sculpture, which I would describe as somehow timeless, elegant and empathetic. Her work has always had a deep connection to the natural world, both in terms of the materials that she uses and the forms that inspire her. And most recently, the overriding influence has been her own personal journey as a mother. And the most recent incarnation of this can be seen in her solo exhibition Playscape, which opened just days ago at Bowley and Workman Gallery in Somerset in the UK. I'll preface this by saying I'm quite jet lagged, so I apologise in advance.
You're allowed.
But yeah, thanks so much for doing this for me. I
Pleasure.
was looking forward to doing this because we've known each other for quite a long time, and some of these conversations I've had with people, with artists I know less well or I've never met. And I feel like I've known you at various kind of important stages of your career, so I'm hoping this will be a nice conversation.
It will certainly be. We have known each other for how long now?
It's best not to think about it.
Too long. But yes, we've had many occasions to collaborate, and it's been a while, so it's nice to have this opportunity.
So I wanted to kind of start at the artistic beginning, I suppose, actually with your degree you did at London, which was at City and Guilds, which I think at the time maybe seemed like an unusual place for a contemporary artist to be doing a degree. But I think it has got a reputation during the time you were there and the years since of being a really interesting alternative to some of the more established art schools in London. And I think particularly with a focus on having a strong practical and kind of material aspect to that. Can you talk a little bit about your experience of that degree and how maybe that sowed the initial seeds for kind of your practice going forwards?
I've come to realize in the long run how grateful I was to City and Guilds to have given me a chance, because it really was a chance, as in I came out of UCL with a degree in literature.
Yeah.
My degree was called Language and Culture. And with that degree, I didn't realize how difficult it would be to get into an art school. So although I applied to all the big ones, Goldsmith and the RCA, it was actually quite difficult to receive a positive response given my BA being in something different than art. So when City and Guilds welcomed me with arms wide open, I was really grateful, because also I realized that actually studying in an environment where you're not a number, but you're a small community, it really almost felt like a little family. The classes were small, we had very close relationships with our tutors, and so it felt really nice and warm and welcoming. And probably the biggest irony of it all is that I studied an environment where I saw all these stone carvers working day in and day out, and at the time I wasn't into stone yet.
So you were, at that time is when you were kind of developing your way of working with kind of fur pelts and glass, right?
Exactly.
But so it still had this interest in looking at sort of textures and patterns from the natural world, I suppose.
Absolutely. I think it probably was the pattern that the fur created encased behind glass that led a lot of people to think it was marble.
Because I remember those early pieces. Yeah, they had that sort of that kind of like veined marbling of the different kind
exactly,
that kind of variation across the furs is very kind of marble-like,
so in working it, I worked on these pieces at first at City and Guild, and most of them were then seen on digital platforms, and a lot of people thought it was marble, given that texture it gave. And so it's made me curious about marble as a material, but it still felt very distant to me in terms of, gosh, where would I even start? It requires a specific kind of studio, specific tools.
And a very masculine material at the time. I think there was very much this association that kind of stone carving was this very kind of macho, male practice.
Probably, yes. Yeah. Although I had already seen a lot of these photographs of Louise Bourgeois.
Yeah, of course.
Breaking
the mold.
Breaking the mold, working the stone.
Yeah.
But I became more and more curious about the material when I did a residency in Italy in, I think it must have been 2012 or 2014, around then. And we visited marble quarries.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting time because it was a time where I had worked with glass for a while, and glass is a particular material. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it has qualities that allow you to do a lot of things, but it's also very fragile. And we were discussing transportations, you and I, earlier, and it's transportation when it comes to glass is always tricky.
I have sadly broken one of your glass pieces.
It happens. You're not the only one, don't worry.
Sorry.
And so, as a result, at that time, I was thinking, gosh, I think I want to take a break from sculpture. I think sculptors go through that stage of wanting to take a break from sculpture.
I think the kind of practical concerns more than anything else, isn't it? Yeah. It's such hard work being a sculptor.
It's a complicated one.
Yeah.
And it was one of those stages where I was like, maybe I should look into filmmaking. Film feels right.
You did a film in the quarry, didn't you?
Exactly. So
that sort of time, I remember that.
So visiting the marble quarries led me to make a film because I wanted to really understand this material that is so important to sculpture as a discipline.
Yeah.
And for me, the best way to understand it was really to spend a lot of time with it. I ended up doing the performance. I had my best friend co-direct the film. And so we spent a lot of time for recce's, but then for the film itself. And through that process of making the film, which is what I wanted to do, I thought, you can send digital files, and it's how wonderful. You can bypass the transport nightmares. I ended up falling in love with marble.
Yeah.
As a sculpting material. So that was the beginning of a new phase. And
so thinking about the kind of chronology of this, was that after you did the bursary at the Royal Society of Sculptors, did you?
Yes.
Was it all the Gilbert Bays? I can't remember what it was called at the time. And
the RBS.
That kind of began your involvement with them. Was that at this sort of time or a little bit after?
It was sort of this time, and because after this residency in Tuscany, and receiving the RBS award, I was then part of a group that would meet monthly, and we would all raise problems within our practices, challenges, or wishes. And at that time, my wish was to learn to stone carve. And so I raised that wish of mine at one of those meetings where my now husband Pablo was. So that meeting was in 2015, and he says, and he raises his arm and he says, well, I know where you could be doing a bit of stone carving. My mother is a sculptor in Mexico.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm sure she'd be more than happy to teach you. And it's a funny thing that he invites me on his mother's behalf.
Yeah.
Only for her to realize she invited me months later. Oh, I didn't realize I invited you.
Yeah.
And so it was an amazing experience. It took me 2 years to accept the invitation.
Yeah.
2017 was the first time I came to Mexico, and it was just, I fell in love with the country, with all the stone that it has to offer.
Yeah.
We ended up carving stone for 2 months in a little village called Tecali de Herrera, which is considered the Pietra Santa of Mexico.
Yeah. So if we take a step back for a second, so the kind of group you had, your kind of peer support group, this kind of community of sculptors you had at the Royal Society of Sculptors, were the other members of that part of this kind of group of artists who Pablo also invited out to work in Mexico City, right?
It was at a time where there were discussions with Luke Hart, who was considering moving, and he ended up moving.
So this was the first time I came to Mexico City as well, when you all had this exhibition at Galleria GAM.
GAM, yeah. That was 2018.
And so that would have been, that was you, Luke Hart, Sam Zili,
Manuel Munoz, Amy Stevens.
Amy, who I was working with at the time, and Luke, who I was working with at the time. Yeah. Who else was in that?
Lucy
was in
Tomlins.
that, yeah. And so it felt like this really special moment of
Pablo.
these, and Pablo, yeah, of this kind of group of sculptors who knew each other and, like you said, had been kind of supporting and helping each other out in London, invited out by Pablo and Manuel, who was also Mexican and sort of had a sort of community here, to kind of become a part briefly of another community in a different place. And like you say, so many of you kind of fell in love with the city, and of course you and Pablo fell in love with each other.
That's a different story. Clouds of marble dust.
And I think the story of sculpture and the story of sculptors, I think particularly in the UK maybe, is so often one of challenges. You know, we've often said that sculpture is difficult to make, difficult to store, difficult to transport, and difficult to sell. Like it's a problematic medium.
Which is why when you meet like-minded people, it creates
exactly. And I think so often sculptors come together. You know, they form these little units, these little mini communities that they kind of help each other out. So certainly that's always been my experience, kind of working with sculptors. It's a very kind of collegial thing, and I think, you know, part of my inspiration for wanting to kind of start Amici was my experience of working with sculptors for so many years and that kind of atmosphere. But yeah, so if we are obviously now recording this conversation in Mexico City, where you now live and work and have your family. What was that kind of transition like? What was the experience that you found in Mexico City that you weren't finding in London? Was it kind of an ease of working? Was it the kind of spaces you were able to kind of work in, sort of the materials you had access to?
Probably all of the above.
Yeah.
Mexico tends to offer more space, more readily access to materials. Quarries are only 3 hours away from the city.
At a lower price point as well.
At a lower price point.
So you're able to kind of experiment with things without being slightly less risk involved, I suppose.
Yes, there's a little bit of that too. And a variety of stone, which is, you have all types of onyxes, of travertine, of marbles. And I mean, it's whenever I want to source a specific kind of stone, and I realize that had I been in London, would I have been able to work with that many stones? Probably not. I would have had to deal with transportation.
Yeah, go to Italy, go to the quarries, look at the stones, get them sent over. Yeah.
And to think that for the last, how many years now? 7 years, I've been able to work with local stones. It's also an impact on the environment, which is much lower.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's also quite, soothing. I know whatever we do will have a footprint, carbon footprint. But I guess it's just a little bit more reassuring when you can do it with locally sourced materials. So that's also quite nice.
And obviously, at the point that you moved over, you'd already started having a career in London, started having kind of a level of success. You were kind of showing in commercial galleries, you'd sort of exhibited in a couple of art fairs and things. What was it like taking that kind of leap of faith out of the kind of support network that you built up there into somewhere where, yes, you knew Pablo, but really you didn't know anyone else. You didn't have any connections with the local art market, the local art industry, or other artists really in the city. Kind of, how did that feel, and how did you go about establishing those connections and making those relationships?
Like jumping in the void, incredibly scary.
Yeah.
I had a 13-year career behind me, and I had people. I had my collectors, my gallerists, my colleagues more than anything, and all of that was just, I had to start from scratch.
Yeah.
So it felt very scary at first. And then something quite incredible happened when I emailed this gallery called Masa here in Mexico to ask for their opening hours. I had heard this gallery was really interesting, had an interesting program, and I wanted to visit it. So I just sent that email, and I received an email back saying, "Oh, we've been told about your work.
Oh, really?
We recognize your name.
It's a good
We've been
first
told
sign.
about your work. We'd love to have you over for a meeting." And this was from Age, who's the founder of Massa, one of the founders of Massa. And so I started realizing, because this is one of the many things that started happening here in Mexico, is that Mexico City, at least, is a city that has really welcomed me and has given me opportunities from the get-go and just really taken chances, because they knew of me, but they didn't really know me personally, or they hadn't worked with me yet. Yeah. So they gave me opportunities that I've come to realize I was really grateful for, because these just opportunities kick-started off my career here in Mexico, which wasn't so obvious. I just thought, how am I going to go about it?
I think that does seem to be a characteristic of Mexico City, and I don't know if it's because it's maybe a slightly smaller or slightly less established kind of contemporary art scene or art market here, that there doesn't seem to be the same gatekeeping and striations within the community. I think there's much more kind of integration between people who you would consider kind of the local blue chip galleries and the project space and every level in between. And certainly my first couple of experiences of coming here, I found everyone to be so welcome and so happy to kind of introduce you to someone who might be able to help you better than they could. And it does feel like there is this sort of, it's all a bit interlinked in a way.
It's a smaller art world over here.
Yeah.
Do you feel that way too?
Certainly. I mean, like I said, this is my first time back for 5 years, and already I can see how much it has grown and changed in that way. There are, a proliferation of galleries that weren't open 5 years ago, and it does feel like it's established itself much much quicker than maybe I could have expected. And we're recording this right at the beginning of Art Week, and just the attention and the kind of buzz that is around the place certainly feels different than it did 5 years ago.
At this time of the year.
Yeah, and I do think, I think all of those characteristics that we've kind of spoken of are a reason for that. People are drawn to, this relatively kind of new art market here to kind of see what's going on, and not just to see what's going on at the fairs, to see what's going on elsewhere as well. Great. Well, I can't wait to see what you do next, and we'll certainly keep up to date with it all. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you, George. Really good to speak to you.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Adeline. It's always great meeting up with old friends who you don't see often enough, and it's fantastic to see her doing so well. Her and her husband Pablo have built this wonderfully balanced life that brings together their family and their two artistic practices. One of the things we didn't get around to talking about was Studio Block M74, which is this incredible dedicated sculpture space within Mexico City that they've developed together and that Pablo runs. And if you're watching the video version of this podcast at Amici.Art, you're about to see that Adeline has built for herself possibly the dream artist's studio in Mexico City. She generously agreed to give me a tour and to let me film that tour. As you come in off the street into this Art Deco house that she's converted, it both feels very much of its place, but also like stepping through some sort of portal into this other realm. And I think the studio somehow almost feels like an extension of her practice. The attention to detail, the kind of sophistication, the honesty of materials, and the reverence for the history of the space just shines through. And honestly, I've visited probably hundreds of artist studios at this point, and this sits right at the very top of the list of the most incredible spaces I've ever visited. So if that's enough of a teaser, you can watch part 2 of this video in the studio with Adeline de Monseignat at Amici.Art now.